What is up, gang? It is I, Carlton Flowers, your crypto pro.
Yay!
And today I have an interesting discussion that I'd like to have, talking about one of the most hotly debated and discussed current events centered around the person who is in charge of the SEC. And the big question is this man, Gary Gensler, who is the chairman of the SEC, the big boss of the SEC, is he doing his job? Is he doing what he is being paid to do? And then I'm going to share with you a little bit of opinion that I have and shed some light on some things that makes a few connections in ways that most people don't think about or have not discussed. So first of all, let's talk about Gary Gensler, the odd-looking fella with the oblong head and the strange reptilian eyes. His background, where he comes from. So he's from the East, and you can tell by his very odd accent. I can't stand the way he talks, by the way. It's just grating and irritating to hear how calmly and nonchalantly he talks about things when you know that he's not telling the truth. Well, he received an undergraduate degree in economics and an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. All right. He is a former employee of the Gold Sachs. He worked his way up the chain to partner in mergers and acquisitions and was also co-head of finance for Goldman Sachs. He went on to be the chair of the Maryland Financial Consumer Protection Commission. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and Undersecretary of the Treasury for Domestic Finance for none other than Slick Willie himself, President Bill Clinton. If that should tell you anything. Not being political, but we all know what type of person that President Bill Clinton was. He served as chair of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, which is kind of strange considering that they have different viewpoints, divergent viewpoints when compared and contrasted with the SEC right now. He was the CFTC chair under President Obama. He also was a professor of the practice of global economics and management at the MIT Sloan School of Management. He taught a course about cryptocurrency. And this gentleman is worth $119 million. So his pockets are fat. He's a fat cat. He's got the bucks, okay? Power and control and money. So as we have all of this news going on in the hearings in Congress, and I'm sure you've watched all the crazy hearings and all of that, and I was going to break down the hearings and talk about whether or not he's lying, and I think it's kind of obvious. We don't need to go into that. But is Gary Gensler overstepping his authority or just doing his job, doing what he's paid to do? Now think about that before you jump to conclusions and think that I'm in support of what he's doing in his job. But let's reel back. Talking about the government, okay? And the individual who appointed him in his current position would be none other than President Sleepy Joe Biden, all right? So people want Gary Gensler out, throw him out. But what happens when the next person comes in who would be appointed by President Joe Biden? Do you think things would change? Do you really think Gary Gensler is the root of the issue when it's the government officials who are threatened by cryptocurrency? Why? Because it represents a loss of control of the people in the future. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But let me share with you some opinion going back to the hearings and all of that. And then I'm going to make some connections and talk about why you need to think about who is at the core of the issue. And it ain't Gary Gensler, even though he is a rich fat cat worth $119 million. My opinion, please. I don't need anybody suing me over my opinion. So Gary's either grossly incompetent or he is purposefully being deceitful, purposely deflecting. I don't think he's grossly incompetent, and that's why I read you his background. He obviously is a very smart man. He wouldn't have been able to climb to the top of the pile of corruption, the corporate ladder and government, if he wasn't a very bright individual. So I don't think he's grossly incompetent, as some people say. I do think that he is doing his job in being purposefully deceptive and deflective and throwing a wrench into the entire process of the evolution of cryptocurrency. Just like the gaslighting, the regulated community saying, just come on in and register and everything will be fine. Register first. And I say gaslighting because he'll say, come in and register, and there's no clear way to register. But then when questions are asked, you get a Wells notice. And that is the notice that we're going to sue you and tell us why we shouldn't. That's gaslighting. The whole bit about Congress grilling him really, in my opinion, doesn't make a hill of beans difference because they can't remove him. He is an appointment by the president. And the only way to change things would be to get rid of the person who does the appointments. Let's think about it. Who was the last SEC chair? It was Jay Clayton, and everyone was up at arms. Get rid of Jay Clayton because he's coming up against XRP, filing this frivolous lawsuit, and then he leaves out the back door. And then we think, oh, good, we're getting Gary Gensler because he's pro-crypto. Kind of funny looking back on that now, isn't it? So the politicians the ones that are elected are corrupt because you have to be corrupt because you have to be bought for a price in order to win an election on a federal scale. The corrupt politicians appoint the SEC chair. And we're looking at the SEC chair and not the appointer. Kind of interesting, isn't it? All right, so let's make some connections now that I've given you my opinion. If you wonder why I keep looking down here, my notes are over here. I need to put my glasses on so I can make sure I get these points, these bullet points right. Okay, let's ask you some questions and see if we can make some connections here, make sense of all this. Who is behind the government that is so fearful of relinquishing control over the people? Go away. That's my Mediacom phone ringing. Disrupted my train of thought. Who is it that is behind the government that is fearful of relinquishing control of the people with the dollar and the current fiat system? Who is it? Who is the financial system? Well, it's the Federal Reserve. What are they comprised of? A bunch of member banks, big banks. People can't buy into the Federal Reserve. It's only the big member banks that comprise the Federal Reserve. Well, then who owns those big member banks? Well, it's the rich, fat cat investors. And that's not me and you. It's not the people. Because the Federal Reserve is not federal and it has no reserve. It's not a federal agency. It's only given authority by the federal government, but the member banks are private. So our entire fiat system is a private system. Now let me read you this that I found in Google News doing some searching. All right. So these investors that own these big member banks that comprise the Federal Reserve, Let me read you this. The Federal Reserve Bank's stock is owned by banks, not individuals. Federal law requires national banks to be members of the Federal Reserve System. They got to be members to play the game and to own a specified amount of the stock of the Reserve Bank in the Federal Reserve District where they are located. Like in Missouri, we have the Western District, we have the Eastern District of Missouri. There is a Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis, so there are member banks that fall under that jurisdiction. All right, so the next question I have then is, well, of these investors, who are the biggest investors, or who is the biggest investor out there? Who owns the majority of all stocks and everything in the United States? I'll give you a few moments to see if you can answer that question before I tell you. Most of you crypto enthusiasts already know the answer to this question, but for those of you who do not, the answer is BlackRock. Now, let me read you something else that I dug out of Google News from April 6th of 2023. Little bit of news here. The Fed, Federal Reserve, turned to BlackRock to help oversee debt buying programs to help stabilize the economy at the onset of the pandemic in 2020. BlackRock's Financial Markets Advisory Group was established in 2008 to provide advice to governments, central banks, and financial institutions. Interesting. So now let's go all the way back to the question I asked about 10 minutes ago. What was that question? That question was, is Gary Gensler doing the job that he's being paid to do? Well, the answer is yes, because who's really paying him to do a job? It's the federal government. The federal government is funded by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is comprised of the big national member banks. The big national member banks are propped up by the investors who own stock. And the biggest stockholder and investor in the United States and of all these banks is BlackRock. So when you want to ask yourself the question, why is the government so much against crypto? Why are they trying to choke out crypto? Operation Choke Point. Why do they appoint a person like Gary Gensler who wants to stifle innovation and run crypto out of the United States? Well, you can take it back to the person that is in control of the money. Now, I won't say it, but I just gave you the chain. So somebody is paying this man. Somebody is giving him instruction. Somebody is saying, when you get grilled before Congress, congressional committee, when it comes to that, you are not to say such and such. You are not to answer certain questions. If you have to look like Bozo the Clown up there, well, by God, that's what we're paying you to do. And he looked like Bozo the Clown. But he's being paid very well. I wish I had a wrench. Imagine this is a wrench. He's being paid very well to take a great big wrench and throw it right into the cogs that run the engine of cryptocurrency. That's what he's being paid to do. Take it to a grinding halt. Screw it up, mess it up, gaslight, trick people, sue them, don't be clear, don't provide guidance, slow it down, run them out of the United States. So the U.S. fiat system, the U.S. dollar, will not be threatened. And those who are in control will remain in control. What do you think about that? Post your comments. Has anybody been talking about this chain of connections that I mentioned? Let me know. Because that just kind of came to me because none of this made sense. And I was not going to take it for face value. So let me know in the comments. What do you think? Do you think Gary Gensler is being paid to do exactly what he's doing? Do you agree with me in that regard? I'd love to know. And I would also love it if you would like, comment, and subscribe to the Crypto Pro channel. And if you would like to help defray the cost of the production of this channel, you can be like my good viewer Malice, who donated $5 of a super thanks on the 11th of May of this month. Thank you very much. I appreciate that $5. So if you want to do the same, then you may do so. And just to answer Malice posted on my wall on the last video update that I did on BTC, Malice said, and I quote, "This is what the people want. Looking forward to these future videos." So I will commit to you, Malice, and everyone else that I will provide content and hopefully not a blurry face. Why is the camera blurred out? Okay, let's see if we can get that to reset somewhat. I will commit to you to providing top-notch information, insight, technical analysis, and ideas. Trading ideas for cryptocurrency. And I do thank you very much. So let's get this sub list to 10,000. Tell a friend, tell your family, tell everyone near and far, because when we get to 10,000, then I'll be able to do YouTube stories and keep you even more up to date with breaking technical analysis developments via the YouTube stories. So that is all I've got for now. This is Carlton, and I am out.